Matthew Nordenhold here, presenting on Dr. A. Charles Catania. So, first off, who was he? Dr. Catania is a product of the Bronx. He attended PS 132. Then he went on to complete a bachelor's and master's degree from Columbia University, finished it off with a PhD from Harvard. So, what has he actually accomplished after doing all of that? You got 15 books, including 5 editions of his textbook, Learning. He's written more than 110 journal articles and contributed to a combination of more than 39 books and articles within encyclopedias. Today, Dr. Catania performs various presentations, and he is an author. He has released his last book in 2017 entitled The ABCs of Behavioral Analysis, An Introduction to Behavior and Learning, and he is currently working on a new book entitled The Evolution of Science, A Brief History of Behavior Analysis in the 20th Century. In his own words, Catania describes himself as a behavior analyst and experimental psychologist with special interests in learning, schedules of reinforcement, and the analysis of verbal behavior. Over his many years of experience, Dr. Catania has worked with humans and animals, mostly pigeons. His goal appears to be to work to understand the individual and how the individual impacts the population in which he or she lives. Basically, learning impacts decision-making, which influences the future of that species. And because of this observation, he draws parallels between Darwin's natural selection and the behaviorism of B.F. Skinner. Basically, B.F. Skinner's behaviorism looks at the moment-to-moment interactions between an organism and the environment. It's how we learn, and we learn to survive. Darwin speaks about natural selection, and what he means by natural selection is his theory on how species as a whole adapt to their environment so that they may continue on, how they can survive. So basically, the overlap, according to Catania, is how the individual learns to survive and teaches others to use the same methods for survival, and it grows exponentially so that a population can live on and continue to be successful over time. So Catania concludes that behaviorism, though, is about the individual. Over time, the individual teaches others, and the successful strategies lead to survival. And those small changes over an exponential period of time lead to the success of a group or a population, which can then in turn cause evolution over a very large span of time, which is basically the theories behind natural selection. Whichever groups live and survive and figure out the best way to adjust or adapt to their environment, those are the ones that move forward. So basically, behaviorism seems to be about an individual, natural selection about an entire population, and Catania puts them together to bridge the gap between what happens within the individual and how the individual impacts the species at large. Catania also expands upon behavior analysis by talking about the different psychologies of learning. He speaks about memory. Memory is basically our reflexes. We encounter a stimuli and we respond. We use our experiences to respond in a very specific way, and when we don't have to think about it, it's from memory. And by saying that we don't have to think about it, it's more like our cognitive process is so fast that it doesn't even appear to be a decision-making process because we've learned from our experiences and we just move forward from there. And that is in contrast to cognition. Cognition refers to basically coming into stimuli that we don't necessarily fully understand in a given moment. So we think about our past experiences, try to figure out what the best decision to make is, and then make that decision based on all of our available options. The fact that as individuals we each have unique experiences, it shows that there are things to be learned at all times, and because there are things to be learned at all times, we can use our experiences to teach others, and we can teach others through the application of verbal shaping. Catania postulates that the verbal shaping of behavior can lead to nonverbal responding. Basically, we provide verbal instructions to people or to others so that they can respond to a specific situation in a specific way. We provide verbal strategies for their nonverbal responses. Catania has used his experiments to show the power of the verbal shaping of nonverbal responding. So what exactly is the power of verbal behavior? After reviewing Catania's works, I found a pattern, a strategy, if you will, for how to use verbal behavior to effectively impact the behavior of others. The following is the strategy that I devised through Catania's work, through the application of Catania's conclusions. First and foremost, Catania found that shaping steps versus full instructional presentation is a more effective strategy in influencing others. Basically, it is more effective to teach one step of a skill at a time and perfect each step of the skill before moving on to the next step in the order towards finishing the entire process. If you do that, you can create reflex at a faster rate in comparison to trying to get others to complete an entire task by remembering all of the steps. So you'll create reflex instead of having to go in terms of cognition. They instead of the other individuals having to think about what they need to do next, they'll have it memorized more quickly if you move in small increments and perfect each step along the way. So verbal behavior leads to nonverbal action. So my verbal instructions will lead to automatic nonverbal action. When individuals do this successfully, there's a tendency for groups to form within a population. And these groups form because they have similar strategies towards problem solving. The more successful these groups are, the higher their chance of survival, which then brings us full circle back to natural selection. Groups that are better at survival tend to pass on their genes in comparison to those who are not as efficient at problem solving. This leads me to one final thought. After reviewing Catania's works for this project, it made me think, how does this take place today? Where is verbal behavior most prominent? How is it currently impacting society? Why are these theories extremely relevant today? And the answer to that is within a small electronic device, either in your hand as you listen to this or watch this presentation, or you have it in your pocket. Everybody has access to constant verbal behavior from other people at all times of the day. Basically, this takes place through social media. Different groups form within social media because they start with pointing out the difference between themselves and their opponents. This takes place on both ends of the equation. I'm not going to point a finger in a specific direction. After pointing out the differences, these groups label the opposing groups. You think of how some people are referred to as Nazis today and others are referred to as snowflakes. And this leads to the dehumanization of the other group. with successful dehumanization of the other group, it makes it more acceptable to do things that would not typically be acceptable, socially speaking, physical attacks, verbal attacks, etc. So basically, Catania's work, in terms of the power of verbal shaping of behavior leading to nonverbal responses, is demonstrated with the formation and the actions of groups of various beliefs presently. Last but not least, here are the references that I used for this presentation. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.